Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and our world with food. I'm Ocean Robbins, and our next interview is with our guest, Dr. Neal Barnard. Neal Barnard, MD, is the founding president of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He's the author of 20 books, including his latest bestseller, Your Body in Balance: The New Science of Food, Hormones, and Health. Dr. Barnard's research, funded by the National Institutes of Health, has demonstrated that type 2 diabetes is a potentially reversible condition. His work has contributed to the dietary guidelines for Americans' acceptance of plant-based diets. Dr. Barnard's latest study showed that a simple diet change eliminated menopausal hot flashes for many women. He is an adjunct professor of medicine at the George Washington University School of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and a dedicated advocate for making nutritional excellence a cornerstone of all medical care. In the interview you're about to see, we'll be talking with Dr. Barnard about some of the most pressing issues around our food system, our mental and cognitive health, nutrition, and the future of life on Earth. Neal, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, it's great to be with you, Ocean.
You're a physician. You've been focused on advocating for a plant-based lifestyle for a long time. You started Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in 1985. What brought you to this work?
Well, I have to say, way before I was in medical school, I really wasn't focused much on food at all. I grew up in North Dakota, and for us, food was just food, and that was it. But as my medical training proceeded and we started to see what is it that really causes illness, the answer just was absolutely clear that food is the biggest driver. But for some of us, it takes us a while to get there. I was doing an autopsy. I shouldn't say I was doing it. I was assisting at an autopsy because I was just starting my medical career. And the pathologist who was doing the autopsies wanted to make sure that it was a teaching experience for me. So the patient had died of a massive heart attack, and the patient was on the table dead. And so the pathologist cut a big section of ribs off the chest, put the ribs on the table, and he said, "Look at this." And there was the heart. And he sliced open a coronary artery, these arteries on the surface of the heart, and he said, "Look inside." And I had gloves on. I felt inside and felt this artery. And instead of it being a smooth artery, it was like concrete. It was as if it had rocks in it. And he said, "That's atherosclerosis. That's your bacon and eggs." And I thought, what? What is this? Anyway, he was letting me know that nutrition, bad nutrition, my nutrition at the time, led to this kind of disease. Anyway, at the end of the exam, he wrote up all the findings that the patient had a myocardial infarction, He left the room. So I had to clean up. I put the ribs back in the chest, and I sewed up the skin. And it was a long exam, so I went up to the cafeteria kind of late to try to get some lunch. They were serving ribs for lunch. And I looked at it, and it smelled like the dead body, and it looked like the dead body, and I realized, wait a minute, this is a dead body that we're eating. So anyway, long story short, experiences like that were sort of kind of gut punches, but the science part, as time went on, just became undeniable, that when we eat, a lot of the foods that so many of us grew up with, meats, dairy products, eggs, fried junk, those are the things that are driving not just heart disease, but cancer, diabetes, many other problems.
One of those things is dairy products. And, a lot of people have grown up thinking that milk is nature's most perfect food. What's the truth about dairy and its impact on the human body?
Well, we all grew up pretty much with the idea that milk is a wholesome thing. In fact, if you don't give your child milk, it's sort of denying the child something. We all kind of grew up with that. And we didn't think of it as industry marketing. We thought of this as good sense. But you take that glass of milk and you send it to a laboratory, and suddenly they tell you some things that you didn't expect. The number one nutrient in milk isn't calcium, it's sugar. Lactose, sugar, that's the number one nutrient. The number two is fat, mostly saturated fat. That's the bad fat that leads to heart attacks and is linked to dementia, Alzheimer's disease. There are also hormones in milk, estradiol, which you don't need at all. And that's probably the explanation for the emerging evidence linking milk to breast cancer. Even stronger evidence links it to prostate cancer. So those aren't things that we thought about when we were growing up, but that's what science has really shown us. And the good news is there are plenty of things to replace that glass of milk.
We have some pretty strong milk lobby that has influenced government policies, school meal programs, etc. Can you talk a little bit about what the industry has been doing, how it's doing it, and what that impact is on public perception?
There are lobbies for everything. I mean, there are lobbies for chocolate and lobbies for berries and lobbies for everything. But when you look at all the food lobbies, one of the most active, busy, aggressive, well-funded is the dairy industry. And they have really exploited what the law allows them to do. There is a law in the United States that says that the Department of Agriculture has to promote American agricultural products. So that means that when the dietary guidelines for Americans are promulgated and the Department of Agriculture is involved in creating them, they're going to say, have 3 glasses of milk every day. That's not science, that's promotion. And so then they will put posters into schools telling kids that this is what they should be doing. And so we all kind of grow up thinking, well, this is truth, but it's really just part of the promotional process. And some of the most surprising things, through the Freedom of Information Act, we found that the dairy industry signs contracts with the US government to include specifically cheese, more cheese in fast food restaurants. Now, why would they do that? Because every community in America, I don't care how big or small you are, there is some fast food drive-through somewhere where all the teenagers are going and a lot of other people too. And so the US government has signed contracts with McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, you name it, to increase the amount of cheese in the food offerings that they have. And we've read these contracts, we've got our hands on them, and it is all perfectly legal. The unfortunate part is it means that the amount of cheese that people are eating in America went up from less than 4 pounds per person per year when the USDA started keeping track to today about 40 pounds per person per year. And that's maybe another 70 or 80,000 calories we're getting every year that we just don't need.
How are they, how would Taco Bell sign a contract? Are they getting some money from the government?
Oh yeah. Maybe I left out the most important part. This is for money. The U.S. government will work with Taco Bell. They'll work with McDonald's. They'll work with Domino's. They'll have a pizza that has an entire pound of cheese on one serving. And so this is a financial deal that works for everybody. The government gets to say, we're promoting American agriculture. Industry is getting support to try new products, to change their menu, to double the cheese on it, to put cheese not just on top of the pizza, but into the crust. And so these are all government projects, and fast food takes it all the way to the bank.
The USDA has a conflict of interest, one could say, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
The U.S. Department of Agriculture has a real conflict of interest, I have to say, because it is tasked with helping Americans understand what good food is. I mean, they have the responsibility, along with the Department of Health and Human Services, to create the dietary guidelines for Americans. They've got to tell you what's healthy. They also have to promote American agricultural products. So on the one hand, they're saying, eat less fat, eat less saturated fat, eat less cholesterol, less sodium. And at the same time, they've got to promote cheese, which has fat, cholesterol, and more sodium than potato chips. So it puts them in an impossible bind. And many people have argued that ought to change.
Yeah, absolutely. How about schools? School meal programs, and what's allowed to be served in schools and what can be promoted in schools. Can you talk a little bit about that and how the animal agriculture industry has a foothold in that?
Yeah, we are seeing now a big conflict in schools because more than ever, people are realizing, wait a minute, not everybody can digest milk. The number one nutrient in milk is lactose, sugar. Lactose is not digestible to a lot of people. It's digestible when you're a nursing baby because you have lactase enzymes that can digest that milk sugar. But as you get away from the age of weaning, for most people, those enzymes go away. And you drink milk, and then you get all that sugar that becomes indigestible, and you get diarrhea and bloating and gassiness and pain. Now, for most white people, there is a genetic mutation that has caused that lactase enzyme to persist. Most other races don't have that. They are the healthy ones because you want to not be digesting milk. You want to not be having it. It has other bad health effects. However, the Department of Agriculture says, and federal law says, that a school lunch, a person behind the counter, cannot offer a 16-year-old kid who may be lactose intolerant, says, I can't drink milk. They are not allowed by law to offer him almond milk or soy milk or rice milk or any other kind of milk unless he brings in a note saying he has a disability or a medical condition. He doesn't have a disability. He doesn't have any medical condition at all. This is totally normal for him. That's the law. And there are a lot of kids nowadays who are speaking out against that. In fact, there was a case in Los Angeles where a young woman, Marielle Williamson, said, I want to have information about this. I want to talk about the downside of dairy. There is another law that says you cannot interfere with the promotion of dairy products, the sales of dairy products in schools. So if a school says, well, I want to put water in the line first, or I want to have almond milk next to it, not allowed. So Marielle was told by her school, you can't be saying bad things about milk. That's against the law. She said, wait a minute, this is America. There's a First Amendment. And so the Physicians Committee, along with Marielle, are suing, not just her school, but the USDA to change that.
Awesome.
And we are going to win.
I'm sure you will. It's an idea whose time came about 30 years ago. Thank you. Yeah, wonderful. Let's talk about brain health and brain fog. A lot of people struggle with mild to more severe brain fog, where it just doesn't feel like the thoughts are processing like they should. And maybe people can remember times in their younger years when it wasn't like that. Or maybe their peak for a little while after the cup of coffee, but then it fades. What's causing the brain fog epidemic, if we may call it that, and how does nutrition play a role?
Yeah. Brain fog is something we're seeing a lot. And, it can happen to everybody. If you're a little sleep deprived, it'll happen. But there are nutritional causes of it. One really obvious one is when we get hooked on something. Caffeine is something that's a part of a lot of people's lives, and they know brain fog before the morning cup of coffee kicks in. That's an obvious one. But there's another one that people may not know about. After that big meal, maybe Thanksgiving dinner or something like that, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, they've had a huge dinner, and suddenly they can barely stay awake. And they're trying to watch a football game or something, and they just can't concentrate at all. Now, they might have thought that it was sugar or it was serotonin in the turkey or something. Nonsense. That's not it. What it is that huge load of fat, especially the saturated fat, the solid fat in cheese, in gravy, and so forth. That solid fat gets into your blood. Your blood is trying to go to the brain, but it's not the watery blood that blood should be. It's more like gravy. Your blood is like the gravy you just ate. It's more viscous. And that means the oxygenation of the brain is not good. And when your brain doesn't oxygenate, the neurons just can't connect. And people feel sleepy. And for many people, this is the way they live every afternoon because they're avoiding carbs because they think that's bad. So they're not eating rice and potatoes and these really low-fat foods. And they're eating a lot of high-fat stuff that's slowing down their blood flow.
And this can have long-term impacts in terms of long-term memory loss and even promotion of Alzheimer's disease. Can you talk about what causes Alzheimer's?
When we make a list of the diseases we never want to get, at the top of that list is Alzheimer's disease. Because when you get Alzheimer's, you lose everything. You lose everybody. And in 1993, the Chicago Health and Aging Project started tracking what people eat. And they noticed something striking, that those people who tended to avoid bacon, cheese, sources of saturated fat, tended to stay mentally clear. They tended to have probably 2/3 less risk of Alzheimer's disease. I mean, that's huge. And so we now believe that what's happening is in the same way as bad fat will affect your heart. It also seems to affect the brain. And the good news, that's something you can change tomorrow. We know that there's a lot of genetic issues with regard to Alzheimer's. You've got the ApoE epsilon 4 allele, it's a genetic trait, you're at higher risk. Even those people can have reduced risk of Alzheimer's if they change their diet.
And one of the interesting pieces of that study that you just referred to was the consumption of leafy greens and its impact on Alzheimer's. Can you talk about that?
Amazingly enough, while there are things that are bad, that are going to increase the risk of Alzheimer's, there are also things that are really good for us. One is leafy greens, vegetables in general. The people who eat the most fruits and vegetables have the least risk of developing Alzheimer's. And in America, what gets you into the most category is just having 1 or 2 servings of vegetables every day. Americans neglect them. If you build them in, you're going to do much better. There's one more, and that's vitamin E. Nuts, seeds, not a lot, just maybe an ounce a day, like a little handful a day. The vitamin E can cut Alzheimer's risk by about half.
Fantastic. What about berries?
Researchers have been looking at berries. If you look at a berry, there's something in there, as you could tell. That deep blue color is coming from something. That something is what are called anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are the color in blueberries, in grapes, and they're actually cousins of the anthocyanins in the autumn leaves when they're turning red and orange and purple. Those are anthocyanins too. The term anthocyanins is not important to remember. What's important to remember is that these antioxidants, that's what they are. They protect the berry. They protect you. If you think about it, a berry is in the sun, in the elements all day, doesn't have an umbrella, doesn't have sunscreen, but it's got those anthocyanins, so that's the protection. And in your body, they can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's. And researchers also have looked at people, they're up in years, their memory is kind of sputtering a little bit, but they would give them just, say, 2 servings of grape juice or 2 servings of blueberry juice, maybe a cup in the morning, cup at night. And what they found is that within 3 months, the ability to learn, the ability to remember was significantly improved. So we should just build these things into our routine. It doesn't have to be a glass of berry juice. It can be berries on your oatmeal, berries on your salad. The berry group is really just at about the top of our healthy food list.
Awesome. What about mental health? We've seen more and more people are struggling with mental health lately. Psychiatric diagnoses of all kinds, ADHD, all sorts of things. Suicide rates have also been up recently. Is there a link between nutrition and mental health?
We recently stumbled into research on the relationship between foods and mental health. And we weren't expecting to go there. We were doing studies on diabetes. And what we found is that when we would change people's diets, their mood would improve. Not only did their diabetes get better, but their mood would improve. Specifically, depression would tend to be alleviated, and anxiety would go down as well. We did a study with Geico, the car insurance company, and we had a large group of people beginning the study because they wanted to lose weight, or if they had diabetes, they wanted to get better. But we noticed that as they changed their diets, their depression would tend to wane, anxiety would go away. We looked at attendance. Just, are you getting to work? That improved too. And so digging into the literature, we found that other people are finding the same things. When you get the unhealthy foods out of the diet and bring the healthy foods into the diet, your brain is not disconnected from the rest of you. And so when you're putting healthy foods into your bloodstream and it bathes your brain in the nutrients it needs, it can help your mood.
Yeah, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about body weight. Obesity rates and excess weight rates have been going up pretty steadily for quite a few decades in the United States and in many countries around the world. We've got a lot of fat shaming, a lot of pain that a lot of people feel around that. Can you talk a little bit, first of all, about that piece, and then also about what's causing this issue?
Absolutely. First of all, it's important to understand that people have very strong feelings from the experiences that they've had. And when a person has gained weight and they're not sure why, and they're trying really hard to follow good advice, or what they thought was good advice, and they're not getting the results that they saw on TV, they might feel like a failure. And not just like a failure in controlling their health, but gee, if I can't control my weight, maybe I won't be a good employee. Maybe I won't be a good parent. And these feelings really get magnified. But I think once a person realizes it's not you, it's bad foods, a toxic food environment, foods that our great-great-great-great-grandparents never heard of, that these foods can be addicting, and that can happen to anybody. But we've got to start with good information. And the good information is, what are the foods that are healthy for you? Avoiding carbs, wrong. Bringing in vegetables and fruits and grains and beans, that's the right choice. When people make these healthy diet changes, suddenly, even if they're not increasing their exercise, even if they're not limiting calories or carbs, the weight just starts to come off. Not super fast. You lose half a pound per week. And that may not be fast, but a half a pound per week, that's 26 pounds per year. You're losing it faster than you put it on. So in our clinic and in our research studies and in all the doctors we talk with, our job is not to wag our finger at a patient. Our job is to be a coach who is working with somebody who doesn't know that she or he is a real potential athlete. We think of it that way. Anybody has that potential, and we're going to show them, here's how it works. Let's just put it to work, and everybody stumbles. Everybody goofs up. And so what do? You just love them right back. Come on, let's keep going. Let's see what we can do. And you always believe in every single person. And everybody has their own journey. And your job, our job, is to support that.
Beautiful. What do you say? Is there somebody, imagine you're talking to a patient, they've fallen off the wagon, and maybe they even feel kind of addicted to unhealthy foods, right? Like they don't feel like they're even the author of their food life. What do you say in that situation?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that foods really can be addictive. Cheese especially, the people don't realize there are actually narcotic compounds in cheese. They're called casomorphins. They were in the milk. They were sort of the mother cow's way of providing a little bit of a natural sedative to the calf. And when you turn milk into cheese, the casomorphins are concentrated. They go to the brain. They attach to the same brain receptors that narcotic drugs attach to. So cheese is not kind of addicting. It is exactly addicting. And there are reasons why people just eat more and more and more of it. Once you realize that, it's not you. It's not your bad childhood. It's not all these things that we imagine, that was it. It's the food. You might like a strawberry. You're not going to binge on 50 strawberries. You might like a slice of bread. You're not going to eat a loaf and a half. You might like beans, but you're not going to eat 3 cups of beans. When it comes to salty, fatty, sugary foods, they're triggering part of the brain that is beyond liking. And it puts us into overdrive. And when we realize that, we also realize that none of these are things that existed a long time ago. Mm-hmm. There was no table sugar until people figured out, I can take sugar cane or sugar beets, and I can send it to a factory and eliminate all the pulp and all the fiber, and I can concentrate it into a form that Mother Nature never thought of. And so instead of it being the sweetness of an apple, I've got sweetness that I can just push, further than anyone ever had. There wasn't any cheese until people figured out how to make cows stand still. And once they did that, and you have a dairy industry, and then suddenly humans are getting narcotics in their food, that's the way it is.
Yeah. What about coconut and coconut oil?
I have to say, there has been a real push in recent years for coconut oil, coconut milk. However, the coconut, while it is a fruit, is not like an apple or a peach or a banana. The fat that's in coconuts is, number one, abundant and highly saturated. So you go to the store and you compare the rice milk, the almond milk, the soy milk, the coconut milk, and you'll look at the little nutrition label, and almost all of that fat in the coconut milk is saturated fat. Does it raise cholesterol? It does.
There are a lot of dietary patterns that people are adopting, a lot of diet fads, if you will. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the most common ones out there and kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are?
Nowadays, there are some people who are still doing the carbohydrate avoidance, the keto kind of diet. And you can understand why, is because a lot of what people eat is starchy foods. And so people have discovered if they stop eating potatoes and breads and fruits and cookies and all of the carbohydrates, which is about 50 or 60% of what we eat, they will lose weight. But many of those foods are healthy foods. Think about the apples and the oranges and the bananas and others, healthy carbohydrate-containing foods. And so we don't recommend a ketogenic diet at all, or a low-carb diet at all, because you're really setting yourself up for the problems that the fat and the meat that's left are going to cause. Now, a Mediterranean diet is popular nowadays, and it's half of a good thing, because in many Mediterranean countries, vegetables and fruits get some respect, and that's a good thing. So a Mediterranean diet is good in that it emphasizes these healthy foods, but it also has some fish, some poultry, some red meat, maybe not as much as a lot of people grew up with, but some, and that limits its value. And the reason I'm going to say that, our research team did a study. We brought in 62 people who wanted to lose weight, and every one of them got 16 weeks of support on a completely Mediterranean diet. They also got 16 weeks of support on a low-fat vegan diet. Everybody did both diets. And it was an amazing thing. On the Mediterranean diet, everyone thought, wow, this is so indulgent. Here I am eating fish, I'm having olive oil on my salad, and how soon does the weight loss start? Like never. We found the Mediterranean diet just really doesn't cause weight loss. And that's understandable. You're eating a lot of fatty foods. Fat is very dense in calories. On the vegan diet, exactly the opposite. The people were nervous starting a vegan diet. They thought, maybe I have to acquire a taste for folk music to do this diet. But then they discovered, no, it's really doable, instead of the...
My mom grew up, she asked her dad, what's a vegetarian? They didn't even have the word vegan.
Right.
He said, sweetheart, those are people who sleep on nails and have long hair, and they don't shower.
People figured, if you're going to be vegan, you've got to wear tie-dyed clothes and whatever. And that's still kind of the image that our research participants have when they come into this. But in this study, people realized that a vegan diet was really easy. Instead of meat sauce on my spaghetti, I have tomato sauce, fine. Instead of the meat chili, I have the bean burrito, very simple. And they lost weight very easily without restricting portions at all. There are many diets out there, but it's really been clear to us that the healthiest diet is one that sets aside the animal products, that brings the plant products right up front in as natural a form as you can get.
And the MIND diet has been studied at some length, which is basically whole foods plant-based. Do you want to speak to the research on that?
Yeah, no, the MIND diet really was started by Martha Claire Morris, who was a great friend, and she really wanted to see, can we tackle Alzheimer's with a healthier diet? And she drew on the research of Mediterranean countries and had it be sort of a Mediterranean diet kind of, and half influenced by the DASH diet, the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. Both of these diets were plant forward, but they did include a fair amount of oil and a fair amount of fish and that kind of thing. And the New England Journal published an article on, would this help reduce the risk of Alzheimer's? And the answer is not really. It wasn't a powerful enough diet. So other researchers, like Dr. Dean Ornish, are taking this a step further, and they're saying, let's get real. Let's really have an entirely plant-based diet and see what that can do.
Based on the literature and what you've seen so far from all the studies that have been done, what portion of Alzheimer's do you think could be prevented with healthier diet and lifestyle?
Well, when we look at it with saturated fat, if you really reduce it, cuts the risk by maybe 60, 70%. A high vitamin E diet cuts the risk about 50%. If you lace up your sneakers, that'll cut the risk further. So if you add all this together, I'm going to say that perhaps as many as 80% of cases of Alzheimer's disease could either be substantially delayed or entirely prevented by diet and lifestyle.
That's pretty massive. How about heart disease?
And by the way, I should say one other thing, that even people who have the genes that increase their risk seem to benefit with the very same diet changes.
Yeah. How about heart disease?
When it comes to heart disease, it's really clear that the drivers are things we know about. It's not just unhealthy foods, animal-derived foods that give you the saturated fat and cholesterol. It's the cigarettes, and it's the added weight. These things can all contribute to it. But those are things that potentially we can control, and I'm convinced that we could prevent probably 90% of heart attacks, as well as the other kinds of cardiovascular issues like stroke.
What about the blood type diet?
The blood type diet is a curiosity that's been around for a long time, and it was really advanced initially by a well-meaning person who noted something that's really true. People who have the type A blood do seem to be at somewhat higher risk of cardiovascular disease compared to people who have type O blood. So that led people to say, all right, if I'm type A and I'm at higher risk, maybe I should be a vegetarian and really take care of myself. And if I'm type O, maybe I don't have to worry about it. I can have meat, and maybe I should have meat. And so people elaborated all kinds of exaggerated theories, saying that type O is more the caveman type and you need meat, and type A is more the vegetarian type. Our research team put this to the test. We brought in people who wanted to lose weight, and we noticed that if you use a completely plant-based diet, which was supposed to be for type A's, the type A's do get better. The type O's get better too. The people with blood type B get better. The people with blood type AB get better. In other words, everyone gets better with that kind of diet. If you give them a meat-based diet, not only, all the blood groups get worse. So I have to say there is nothing to the blood type diet. It is true that different blood types do have different risks. They all do better on a plant-based diet.
It's like giving your body the right fuel. Even if you do whatever the issues are, it seems like the right fuel helps everything, doesn't it?
Some of us are at higher risk of lung disease. You all need oxygen. So everybody's at higher or lower risk of heart disease and other things, but you all need the power of vegetables and fruits and whole grains and beans, and everybody can be injured by unhealthy foods, particularly animal products.
Some people seems like do everything right, eat super healthy, and they still die eventually. Some people sooner than others. Can you speak a little bit to risk reduction and the reality that risk reduction is not the same as living forever in everlasting perfect health, and how to hold that in our consciousness?
While we promote a really healthy diet for everybody and healthy lifestyle factors too, we also have to remember that the body's a fragile thing. Things can happen even if you're doing everything that's as healthful as it could possibly be. Nonetheless, we do what we can to keep our risk to a minimum and to fuel the healing process as well as we can.
Thank you. Supplements on a plant-based diet, or for anybody really. We want to get our nutrients from food as much as possible. Can you speak to the importance of that, first of all, but then also what supplements we may still benefit from?
We really want our nutrition to come from food. Vegetables and fruits, they're not just pretty. They are powerhouses of vitamins and minerals, but there are some supplements that play a role. And at the top of the list is vitamin B12. You need it for healthy nerves. You need it for healthy blood. And it's not made by plants, and it's not made by animals either. It's made by bacteria. And the bacteria in the gut of a cow will create this B12. And so when people eat meat, they get B12. Now, people will say, well, those individuals eating plants, from their bacteria in the soil and on the plants and on our fingers and in our mouths, prior to the advent of modern hygiene, and that would give us the trace of B12 we need? Maybe. But with modern hygiene, those days are gone. So I encourage everybody to take vitamin B12. And that's especially true for people who are taking metformin for diabetes. It's the most commonly used diabetes drug. Or people who are taking acid blockers. For people who are over 50, they very often run low in B12, no matter what they're eating. But for people on a plant-based diet, which is what we're recommending, everybody should be on B12.
Mm-hmm. Any others?
If you are in the sun, the sunlight on your skin creates vitamin D, and vitamin D helps you absorb calcium from the foods you eat. That's its job. And it might also be a cancer fighter too. But if you're indoors all day, if you're working inside, and when you go outside you use a sunscreen so that the UV light doesn't penetrate, you don't make vitamin D anymore. So that's why a lot of doctors nowadays are saying take a supplement. And what many would say is about a 2,000 international unit supplement every day is a good dose, and I'm inclined to believe that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. How about EPA and DHA?
You know, when it comes to EPA and DHA, these are the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. We are right in the middle of trying to sort all this out. And I don't think anybody has all the answers, but here's kind of where the evidence comes down. You do need omega-3s, and there is one called alpha-linolenic acid, and it's in plants, and in your body there are enzymes that will elongate it to make EPA and DHA. Those enzymes get distracted, so if you eat other fats other than alpha-linolenic acid, the enzymes will start processing that, and you will not make as much EPA and DHA. So you do need these long-chain fatty acids. So job one, have plants that will give you the omega-3 you need, and don't eat a lot of other greasy foods that will tie up your enzymes. That's good. Now, other people will say, well, wait a minute. I really want to boost my DHA because my brain needs it. Maybe I should take a supplement. And one of the supports for that comes from observations that people whose blood tests show that they're low in DHA, they do seem to have a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease. So that has led people to want to supplement. And then they're supplementing with fish oil, which does have DHA in it. But then people think, hold on a second. The fish might have mercury and heavy metals, and plus you're depleting the oceans and causing all kinds of problems. Maybe I don't want to do that. Well, industry has come in with vegan DHA, and it's clean and fine, and at least as good as the animal-derived DHA and EPA. Fair enough. The other consideration, one last consideration though, came in, and that's that in supplement research trials, people supplementing more EPA and DHA had higher risks of prostate cancer. We thought this was a fluke. We had no idea what this is about. The problem, and we don't know why. I mean, we can't figure out a connection between those two. But it shows up consistently in one trial after another. So that's where we're left. Some people will say, well, I don't want to get Alzheimer's, so I'm going to take the EPA, DHA. I'll take the vegan one because I want it to be clean. But will it increase the risk of cancer? The jury's not back yet.
Mm-hmm. More to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're doing a lot of studies. Can you tell us about maybe one of the studies you've conducted at Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine or at Barnard Medical Center that just kind of knocked your socks off?
A number of years ago, a foundation came to see us, and they said that they were a research foundation, and they kept getting applications from people who wanted to do diabetes studies, and diabetes studies on rats and mice. And they came to us because they said, we're tired of this. We've been funding these studies. We're not getting anywhere. There's got to be a better way. What would I suggest? And I said, well, if I were you, I would study people, and I would study what they're eating. That's going to be the answer to diabetes. And they said to me, fine, design a study for us. And we did, and we started working with them. And we started to see that diet made a big difference. And NIH, the National Institutes of Health, then came in and funded us. In our NIH-funded diabetes research study, we wanted to test the best current diet. Portion control, don't eat too much carbohydrates, cut calories, that kind of thing. Compare that to a completely plant-based diet that didn't limit calories, didn't limit carbohydrates, but it was focused on really healthy foods. And what we discovered was that on this vegan diet, the blood sugar control improved 3 times better than the best current diet. And I started to see something I'd never seen before, which was diabetes going away. We had a 35-year-old man in this study. He'd had diabetes for 4 years. But by changing his diet, not exercising, not limiting calories or anything, just plant-based, low-fat diet, he lost about 60 pounds. His hemoglobin A1C, this test that shows you your blood sugar control, it went from 9.5, which is really high, it's out of control diabetes, down to 5.3, which is not diabetes, it's not pre-diabetes, that is a normal 14-year-old kid type A1C. In other words, diabetes is not a one-way street. This blew me away. When I got his lab test, I had to close my office door. Here was a man who had stopped his diabetes medications after having had this disease for years. His blood tests were totally normal, and we suddenly realized this disease, at least for some people, can be cured. And as time has gone on, we've realized that if we give people the tools and the information, a little bit of support, they can do this themselves.
Yeah, fabulous. What about hormone balance? A lot of people struggle with hormone imbalances, and it can affect mood and sleep and all sorts of other factors. What are some of the factors that go into that, and how does nutrition play into it?
Researchers have been digging into hormones because, first of all, hormones are a big driver for problems. Estradiol, the female sex hormone, is a big driver of breast cancer risk. Your body has some of it, but if it has too much of it, you're at higher risk for breast cancer. But researchers have looked into how foods might control that, and they found that if you're on a higher fiber diet, the fiber helps your body to get rid of some of that estradiol on its own. If you're on a lower fat diet, your body can get rid of some of that estradiol too, bring the amount back to where nature wanted it to be. And when a woman does that, what she may discover is that her body feels dramatically better. We've seen young women with terrible menstrual cramps. You know, anybody can get menstrual cramps, but for some women, maybe 1 in 10, it's like off the scale, I'm not going to work today type cramps. And what we have discovered that when that woman will try a diet that has no animal products at all and very little added fat, she's keeping even vegetable oils to a bare minimum. Suddenly, she's not getting much fat, and everything in her mouth is high in fiber, beans and vegetables and fruits and so forth. The cramps diminish. They sometimes absolutely go away. Now, menstrual cramps aren't going to kill you, although they might feel like it. But if you've discovered that you can control your hormones and you can feel the difference, then what that means is then for the rest of your life, you've got control over things like breast cancer risk and other things like fertility problems, or even the menopausal hot flashes that come when women are in their early 50s. All of these can be changed based on what you're eating.
What about soy and phytoestrogens?
One of the big controversies that comes up is about soy. Back in the 1930s, researchers noticed that soy products have what are called isoflavones. And isoflavones, if you dissect them, they look sort of like estrogens. They look like female sex hormones. And in fact, they bind to estrogen receptors. That made everybody panic. Maybe these are going to cause cancer just like estrogens do. But as research has gone on, exactly the opposite turned out, that the women consuming the most tofu and soy milk and miso and tempeh have substantially less risk of developing breast cancer. And if a woman has had breast cancer and she eats more soy, her risk of dying is diminished as well. Soy doesn't cause cancer, it reduces that risk. Unfortunately, not everybody reads these studies, and there's kind of a presence on the internet still saying soy might actually increase cancer risk, when exactly the opposite is true.
How does that work in the body? If it's binding with the estrogen receptor cells like estrogen, is it functioning differently, or is it even blocking them out?
Okay. So this raises the question of why. Why is it that soy could reduce cancer risk? And part of the reason is that we actually have 2 different estrogen receptors. You've got estrogen receptor alpha. That's where estradiol attaches. That is the cancer driver. That's the gas pedal in your car. There's another one, estrogen receptor beta. That's the brake in your car. And that's where the isoflavones preferentially attach. So one, your car goes, the other, the car stops. And so my analogy is that if you're having a lot of estradiol in there that's attaching to the alpha receptor, increase the cancer risk. So soy products are actually one of the things that we encourage people to include to reduce the risk of breast cancer in particular and to improve survival after diagnosis. And men, I got a message for you too, and that is that the same thing happens with prostate cancer. Men consuming the most soy have the least risk of prostate cancer.
What about so-called man boobs or feminization or loss of sex drive or loss of libido, all these things? some people say, because maybe it's the phytoestrogens in there, they're going to make men more feminized. Is this true? Is there any data to back it up?
When you talk about soy to some guys, they'll think, wait a minute, soy is going to cause man boobs. That's their term for breast enhancement. And you'll,
pecs, yes, breasts, no.
you go into the locker room and you will see there are some guys who do have what looks like breast enhancement, and they'll think, oh, it must have been soy or something like that. Soy does not cause man boobs, and you can easily prove this yourself. Go to the beach on a hot August day, and you'll see a guy pulling off his shirt and he's got some breast enhancement. Go right up to him and ask him, how much tofu have you had this week? And I promise you, he will say, tofu, I don't eat that. I eat pizza. I eat cheeseburgers. I'm a normal kind of guy. In other words, he's not eating soy. The reason that he got breast enhancement is he's eating fatty foods. As he gained weight, his fat cells take his testosterone. The testosterone goes into the fat cell. It's converted to estrogens in the fat cell, and it's kicked out into his blood. Body fat creates estrogens. And because he's gained weight, that's caused his man boobs. When he goes on to a healthy plant-based diet and his weight comes down, the breast enhancement goes away.
And is that what about virility and testosterone in general? Is that affected by soy?
When we see people who could consume the most plant-based foods, their virility, their fertility are dramatically better than people who eat animal products. And where this comes up is in the primary care office, where Hank goes in and says to the doc, there's something wrong with my nature. He's beating around the bush a little bit. What he means is he's got erectile dysfunction. And he imagines that he needs a prescription for that or whatever. But the doctor has to say, wait a minute, I can give you a prescription. Let me tell you what caused erectile dysfunction. You've been eating meat, dairy products, bad fat. That's increasing the atherosclerotic process in your bloodstream. It doesn't just affect your coronary arteries. It affects all the arteries, including the arteries to your private parts. What I'm saying is that when you eat fatty foods, animal products, you're closing off the blood supply to the male sexual anatomy. And so the primary driver of erectile dysfunction is a bad diet, aided and abetted by smoking. Good news. This is reversible. In the same way as Dean Ornish showed you can reverse heart disease, the arteries open up again. That'll happen to Hank when he has had erectile dysfunction, starts the low-fat vegan diet. Takes maybe 6-8 weeks. But what you'll see is that he starts telling you that his sexual performance has come back.
Thank you. Broadening a little bit to another area here. Part of PCRM's focus is on building not just a healthier world, but also a more compassionate world, and establishing that those don't have to be at cross purposes; those go together very deeply. I want to touch on the compassion piece for a moment. Why, as a physician, do you think it's important for human beings to care about the welfare of animals?
For physicians, it's important to care not just about the patients you're seeing, but to care about everybody who's not in that room. That means the patient's children, who are maybe going to acquire the same dietary habits, the planet that they're going to be living on, and frankly, the animals that we share it with. Now, when we're kids, we think, gee, I don't want to be a sissy and seem too compassionate. But on day one of medical school, the instructor looks you in the eye and says that your compassion is what makes you a doctor. And memorize these words: first, do no harm. And that means do what you can to be kind, to be compassionate, to the people who you're going to be treating, but to everybody else to the extent you can. There's a lot of cruelty in this world, and life is short. Let's see what we can do to extend that compassion to the people and to the animals that we're sharing this planet with.
And in that light, can you touch a little bit on the factory farming industry and how its impacts affect human health as well? Right.
When we look at what goes on a farm, now, don't get me wrong, my grandpa was a farmer. My dad grew up on a farm. You could go about as far back as you wanted to trace in my family tree. These are all good people who were raising livestock because they thought we needed to for health. But I have to say, when you look under the covers of it, you start to see things that make you realize there's got to be a better way. When the animals are slaughtered, when you take that cow or that chicken and you hang them up by the legs, that is a terrified animal who did not opt into this. Dairy sounds harmless because you're not going to kill the cow, are you? Well, every glass of milk came from a cow who was artificially inseminated so that she could be pregnant, because once she gives birth, then you can milk the cow. But when she gives birth to a male calf, he's killed for veal. Female calf taken away, raised in isolation until she becomes artificially inseminated. And although a cow lives in nature to age 20, on a dairy farm, age 4. She's not earning her keep anymore, and they're going to send her to slaughter. So the dairy industry is a meat industry. The animals are all killed eventually. It's just that it takes a few years to get there. So the reason I say these things is when people start to think, that's kind of creepy. Maybe I don't want to be involved in that. Maybe I want to make a more compassionate choice. Well, your coronary arteries don't care why you changed. If you changed for health, for compassion, or because you're an environmentalist, or you just want to be a good example for your kids, you get the benefit no matter what.
Let's talk about that environmental piece for a second. What is the environmental impact of our food choices? And for somebody who wants to be part of the solution on planet Earth, what do they need to know?
Let's face it, the Earth is changing. You just look at the thermometer any day. We are inching up more and more and more. And so we know that the greenhouse gases are having an effect. If anything, it's probably more rapid than scientists had predicted. There are a lot of drivers of this, but one of them is the fact that if you could take all the cows in North America, put them on one side of the scale, take all the people in North America, put them on the other side of the scale, the cows outweigh us dramatically. The mass of cows is just huge, and every single one of them is a belching methane creator. It comes out the front end, and methane coming out of every animal in the feedlot, in the dairy industry, and so forth. Methane is a dramatically powerful greenhouse gas, much more powerful than CO2. And so researchers have concluded a long time ago that while we're waiting to cap the smokestacks and we're waiting for people to drive electric and all the things, that should all happen. You can change what you have for lunch. And as soon as you do, you become a methane fighting machine yourself.
And it's interesting because CO2 builds up and then lasts a long time. Methane's shorter acting, but so intense. And to help more rapidly address climate change, methane is actually a more urgent point of focus, isn't it?
Absolutely. Methane is an urgent point of focus, but the beauty of it is so easy to deal with. It is something that when you pack your kids' lunch for school, you're making a choice either to degrade the environment or to protect it.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of people know they should move in healthier directions, but it's not always easy to do what they know. For somebody who is on the fence a little bit, thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds good, this sounds important, but cheese tastes good, but I don't know what I'll do for Thanksgiving, but habits are hard to change and life is stressful. What do you say?
People will imagine that to go on a healthy diet, and for us, we'll say, plant-based diet, that's the way to go. People are a little bit nervous about that, and they imagine it's hard. It's not really so hard. Inside, it's very much like June. Kids are all going to the swimming pool. They think it's going to be cold. They stick their foot in the water. I'm not sure if I'm going to dive in. Once they do, after about 5 minutes, the water feels fine. They're having a blast. Changing your diet's the same way. I'm not sure I'm going to like it. Let me stick my toe into this diet a little bit, see if I like it. As soon as people do, they discover there is a huge range of foods. So what we do at the Barnard Medical Center and in all our research studies is we encourage people to take a week and just try out the different foods, stick their toe in the water, so to speak. And they'll discover, okay, there are Italian foods, spaghetti with a tomato sauce. There are Chinese foods. There are Mexican foods. Just about every cuisine has things. And if you normally have a burger, have the healthy veggie burger. If you have sausage for breakfast, there's a veggie sausage for you. Or you just want to have a bowl of cereal, there are a zillion non-dairy milks. Try different things out. Make a list of the ones that you like. Once you've found them, now do 3 weeks, all plant-based, all the time. By the end of that 3 weeks, your life will have changed because you'll have a taste for healthy foods and your body is showing the benefit.
And that creates positive feedback loops, right? In my experience, people who feel good tend to do good. We make better choices when we're feeling better about ourselves.
You said a really important thing. Some people think, well, just baby steps. Let me just take, little steps. And sometimes doctors say, well, I want to meet you where you are, so I'm just going to escort you gently into this diet. We don't do that. Here's why. I want you to feel the reward now. I want you to feel the power of health. So if I just, take the bacon off your cheeseburger, we're not getting there. So I'm going to bring in healthy foods, but we're going to make sure they're ones that you like. So that you want to be on this journey, but I want you to be able to feel the weight coming off, the blood sugar coming down, the energy coming back, your digestion finally making sense again. I want you to get that reward, and I want you to get it now, because when you get that way, then you feel like, okay, let me share this with other people. Let me really keep going.
Beautiful. We've been talking with Dr. Neal Barnard, founding director of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, best-selling author of 19 books, I believe, and one of the real trailblazers in the movement to do the research and spread the word about what is possible for the human body and for us to live in right relation with animals and the earth. Neal, thank you so much for your work, for your wisdom, and for your partnership in the food revolution.
Well, thank you, Ocean. If you don't mind, I just want to say one thing to you. It's one thing for us to do research studies and to talk to doctors about how to get this word out. But you have done something, and your dad and your family has always said, this is an urgent issue. We're speaking up for some of the most important things that our planet has ever had to deal with. And you get the word out in a way that is so important that for me as a doctor, I just love the fact that you're doing that. You're changing the world, and I'm delighted to work with you.
Thank you.